Morning News, DallasNews.com. Thanks for joining me on this first foray into YouTube Live territory to talk about the Rangers, their upcoming season, and to answer your questions. As always, this is a first try, so if there's a couple of bumps, stick with me, and we'll get through it. I'm happy to answer questions. You can use the chat function to ask them to me, and I will get to them as quickly as I possibly can. In the meantime, since I'm here in the Dallas Morning News studio, I may summon people in here to help me with some technology, and I will talk about the Rangers spring training preview, or I'll try to preview spring training, which starts on Monday the 10th. Or Tuesday the 10th. Starts just a few days from now. I'll be leaving on Monday the 9th, right after the Super Bowl, to get out to Arizona to look at a team that's going to be very significantly changed. From the manager to some faces in the lineup, and certainly some new additions on the pitching staff and an overhauled bullpen. And look, we'll break some news. The Mavericks traded Anthony Davis to the Wizards. I don't have a lot of details on that, but look, you're getting breaking news right now. The AD era is over, and if you've listened to the Sports Day Insider podcast with Kevin Sherrington and myself and a bevy of Dallas Morning News insiders, I think you know my stance on this, that moving on from everything associated with the Luka Doncic trade, from Nico Harrison to the players acquired, was what the Mavericks needed to do. So as the trade deadline here rapidly approaches, the Mavericks have moved on from AD, and I don't know, I guess basketball season's over, aside from Cooper Flag exploits. So there's that piece of trash. What I need to do right now is talk a little bit about where this club is, the Rangers are, going into spring training. And I'm going to ask if one of our producers can come in here for just a quick second to help me with something very quickly so that I can make sure I'm getting all the questions. Hi, Sam. I need to get to the YouTube portion.
No, you don't.
Okay.
Because the chat is just open over there, and it'll flow in from the side. Yeah.
That's it, right?
Mm-hmm. You should have, no, sorry. Where's your chat? Right here. Public chat. Everything should flow in from there.
Okay. All right. I am well equipped now, so please ask questions, because right now, I'm not going to lie, the question queue is empty. But in the meantime, look, let's talk about the Rangers and going to spring training. First thing I think that is important this year is not so much a project on the field per se as it is messaging. And I asked Chris Young about this, and this will be in a story I write later this week, but I asked Chris Young about the most important thing he needs to see this spring from his team. And he didn't hesitate. The first word out of his mouth was hunger. And then he went in to describe that. He wants to see a greater hunger. That's not to say that this team didn't put in effort last year, but I think there is some thought that after 23, the Rangers went through some hangover period in 24 and maybe got a little bit complacent in 2025. So I think he wants to see a hunger and a drive, and that I think means he wants to see performance in spring training as well. You know, one thing that stuck out to him last spring was he did not like the offensive approach that appeared during spring training, and I think that's why Donnie Ecker and the hitting staff basically was pretty much on the hot seat from day one, and quite frankly, he was right on target about that. You know, the hitting approach was not good. No matter what the Rangers tried to do, it didn't ever get it got marginally better, but it didn't ever get significantly better. And over the second half of the season, certain guys made progress, but as a whole, it was a bad offense. There's no way around it. And so with that, let me take this first question from Miguel. Miguel asks if I think Josh Young will take a step forward. I think when the hunger and the approach issue it applies to Josh probably more than anybody. If I'm singling one person out, on the roster, I'm probably singling out Josh Young. This is going to be really, if you go back to the fact that he debuted in the end of 22 and he was an All-Star in 23, he's had a lot of big league playing time for the Rangers, even though he's had some injuries mixed in. And I think the Rangers really want to see a step forward. Where he was in the first half of 2023 is what the Rangers thought they were getting in Josh Young. He was a little bit more disciplined, but aggressive. Did not chase pitches out of the zone, and he didn't get himself out. And I think what they saw the last 2 years is a guy going backwards in that regard. I think last year some of that may have been impacted by Josh trying to do too much, and knowing that he got himself in a hole early and trying to dig out of it, and then it led to chasing bad pitches. It led to getting himself out when he was ahead in counts. He did. I think I've referenced this already in my 26 things that can improve for 26 column, but Josh's batting average when he was ahead in the count and after getting up 2-0 was his batting average and his OPS were among the worst in baseball. I think second worst. So, yeah, I think that's somebody who's going to be under, for lack of a better term, a little bit of a microscope in spring training. And I think the fact that Cody Freeman had a really strong September with this club, and the spark and the hunger that he showed, I think, we've talked about competition at second base as an offseason issue with Josh Smith there, replacing Marcus Semien. But I think there's going to be some competition at third base as well. And on second base, to be perfectly honest with you, I think Josh Smith is going to, he's the incumbent, essentially. Look, he's had over 500 plate appearances each of the last 2 years. He's been a regular player. The Rangers need to see better production in the second half, but I don't think there's any question going into the season he's going to be an everyday player. Steve wants to know about labor discussions and how they will impact what the Rangers spend, contracts and trades, being handed bulletins. This is live news is a whole new foray for me. And let me answer this question real quick. Steve, I think it has had an impact on what the Rangers spent this offseason. I think that was a big part of Ray Davis's calculus in wanting to trim payroll back and not hand out long-term contracts because they don't know what the scenario is going to be past 27, and what a new CBA and what limits on spending may be in place. I think that's what the owners are hoping for is some limits on spending. And so I think, yeah, he's been, I would consider Ray more of a hawk when it comes to labor than other guys. And I think that's been a big part of the Rangers' considerations here. I think when it comes to contracts in season versus and trades, I think the Rangers, if they're contenders, I think they'll be aggressive and they'll spend money. Now, what they're going to be spending money on is rental players. And so, there's not going to be a lot of long-term obligations that go along with that. So I think if they are contenders, with the addition of Mackenzie Gore, the idea is for this team to win. And if this team is going to try and optimize that, they're going to have to be in a position to be willing to trade. The complication with all of that is that it's really hard to see where the Rangers can make meaningful trades this in season because of how thin the minor league system is right now beyond Sebastian Walcott. And I think you're going to see Caden Scarborough really take a step forward into prospect rankings. I believe he was number 99 or was in the top 100 on MLB Pipeline's most recent top 100. But I think he's going to move up as the season goes along. So I don't know exactly where the depth is in the minor league system to make deals right now. And that's something that will, kind of evolve. I'm going to take 1 second. We're getting a bunch of questions in here, and that's good. But I want to just take 1 second to retweet what I did. So give me 5 seconds to re-promote the live chat that is going on right now, and I will. So you'll just have 2 seconds of dead air, okay? Just bear with me. It won't be like when Josh Lewin was doing the Rangers and you had nonstop talking, but you will have just 2 seconds of dead air. Okay, I'm back. Um, Bill Flanagan, a good friend of mine from Austin. Bill wants to know if the Rangers can survive the schedule early in May, in April and May. And listen, I pointed this out also in the 26 for 26 column. I believe 27 of the first 40 games are against teams that went to the postseason in 2025. You've got the Phillies, you've got the Yankees, you've got Seattle, two series there. You've got a series in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. The home opener is against the Reds, who finished strong and made the NL playoffs last year. So, yeah, it is a real challenge, and it is really important for this team to get off to a strong start. That's going to be challenging. But again, I think that's why there's going to be an emphasis on execution and performance in spring training, because it's not going to be an opportunity to kind of ease into the season um, as opposed to some previous years. I think when I did the calculation last year, I think 20 of the first 40 games were against playoff teams from 24. It was a little bit less, but uh, this is a difficult. It's a difficult schedule to start the season, and look, you have two teams in the American League West in Seattle and Houston that both won over 85 games last year. Seattle obviously went to the ALCS. The Astros missed out on the playoffs by one game. So you've got tough games inside the division. You've got the Dodgers on the road. You've got the Yankees here in April, and then you go to New York in the first week of May. You spend Mother's Day week in New York. So that's tough. And that Yankee trip comes on the end of a series against Detroit, which, means at least one date against Tarek Skubal. So it is a really tough schedule. If they are at 500 by mid-May, I think that's a good position. But then you've got to also surge a little bit in May and June. And you should hopefully be in a position at that point in time where you've got Cody Bradford back, and you've got a better feel for both Kamal Rocker and Jacob Latz in their roles, and maybe some roles have emerged in the bullpen. So hopefully you are in a position where you can surge a little bit. Um, Angel R wants to know, maybe it's on Hill, how concerned am I that this team prepares to be relying on a lot of guys bouncing back from poor performances on offense last season? And look, it's a real concern. If you look around this field, whether it's injuries or poor performance, you're talking about Jake Berger at first base needs to bounce back. The good news is, I think he slugged over 600 against fastballs in August and September last year. So he seemed to be bouncing back when he was healthy. We've already talked about Josh Smith, who needs to be able to show as the season goes on that he can maintain a good first half. Corey Seager coming back from injuries that shortened his season once again. Third base, we've talked about Josh Young and the real need to bounce back there. Going to the outfield, I think Wyatt Langford has made steady progress in each of his first 2 years, but I think in year three, the Rangers are looking for a guy who is going to step up from a 775 OPS guy to a guy pushing 800 and above and 25 plus home runs. So he's got to not just maintain, but take a step forward. If Wyatt stays in left field as opposed to potentially playing center field, and we can talk about that in a minute, but Evan Carter, who will either play center or left, he needs to show that he's healthy and can take some. I think he took some steps forward last year when he was healthy. I think he took some steps forward against left-handers, which went a little bit under the radar when he was healthy. But I do think that, yeah, this is a big deal on offense for this team to get a number of guys to bounce back. And this is part of why the Rangers didn't go out and get a number of offensive bats in the wintertime, is they have young players who still need to establish track records and have had a couple of bad seasons or poor seasons they need to bounce back from. And the Rangers felt like if these guys are productive, what they're spending on most of those guys is really good value. So they were kind of hemmed in a little bit there, both by what they had available to spend, and they didn't have the ability to really make any mistakes. And I think by the idea that if these guys are who the Rangers believe they are, that they're really good values. It's a great question. And I think it's something that really needs to be watched as the season goes on. What is my percentage guess that Kamal Rocker makes the opening day pitching rotation? I'm going to say this is from Juan. And Juan, I think I'd have to label it better than 50% in my estimation. I think the Rangers would really like to get to a situation where they could put Jacob Latz in the bullpen. As much as I believe Jake deserves an opportunity to start, and as much as I believe he he can be an effective big league starter, I think if this team has championship aspirations, the idea of Jake in the bullpen gives you a very multifaceted weapon. I've touched on this on some podcasts a little bit, but let me go over this. In April, in particular, I think Nathan Eovaldi coming back from double sports hernia surgery, is going to be on something of a pitch count and being monitored very closely. And look, the Rangers would like to get more innings out of him than they've got in the last 2 years. So I think he's going to be limited a little bit. I think at the back end of the rotation, whether it's Rocker or Latch, you're not going to have a guy who's going 6 innings every time out. So let's assume that you could get Kamal Rocker through the lineup twice, as he continues to develop a third pitch, something off speed. All right. So if you've got, say, Nathan Eovaldi pitching in the number 2 spot and Rocker pitching in the number 5 spot, now you've got an opportunity to employ Latz as a lefty behind a righty twice every turn through the rotation in April. And that would give you a really good quote unquote piggyback option, or a guy to pitch the 6th and the 7th inning, or in some situations, pitch the 7th and the 8th, and continue to gain confidence as a late inning leverage guy. And listen, I know there's going to be more questions about the bullpen as we go on, but there's no set in stone closer here, and those roles are very much fluid and going to continue to evolve as the season goes on. So I think Jake can be really effective in the bullpen. I think he can be effective in the rotation. And the wild card in all of this, of course, is when does Cody Bradford come back? But right now we're talking about April. We're talking about opening day only. But certainly Cody Bradford will get a shot at the rotation in all likelihood when he returns sometime in May, which is the schedule right now. He didn't have Tommy John surgery. He had internal brace surgery, which doesn't require the full year of rehab. It's more like 7 months. Bradford ended up missing all of last year, but he didn't have the surgery until late in the season. And Richard follows up with this question about, will we see Patrick Corbin back, which is another wild card in this, because Patrick Corbin is still out there. The Rangers have discussed Patrick Corbin. They'd be foolish not to. It was a great value move for them last year. Ended up getting Corbin another, in addition to the $1 million and change that he signed for guaranteed, with the innings he piled up, I think he made another $2 million in incentives. So Corbin's always been durable. He's not going to put up sexy numbers, but he does eat innings. And if he liked his time in Texas, which I believe he did, he certainly would be a good fit here as another value sign. And I think even though we're 5 days out from spring training starting, I think the Rangers have shown over the last few years a significant willingness to add as spring training goes on. Corbin was a late sign last year, middle of March, after John Gray and Bradford both got injured. Luke Jackson was added to the bullpen in March. You go back to 24, the Rangers made some additions, and in 23 they signed Will Smith in spring training as well. So all of that has. In 24 they added Michael Lorenzen late in spring training. So they've got this history, and Chris Young is not going to look away from the bargain bin. And I wrote a column earlier this week about 5 free agents that are still out there that I think, would fall into the Rangers' potential price range, which, look, is only going to be $1 million, $2 million, maybe $3 million guaranteed for somebody. But that list starts with Patrick Corbin, and I believe includes Miguel Andujar, a right-handed bat who's a versatile guy who could potentially be part of an outfield platoon or a utility guy. And look, there's a couple of left-handed relievers still out there as well. Danny Coulomb, Richardson resident, who finished the season with the Rangers last year. He's a lefty. Jalen Beeks, who's from Fayetteville, Arkansas. He finished the season strong last year. He could be an option as well. So I think this is still a the roster remains a work in progress, and I don't think that the end of the offseason by any stretch means the end of Rangers moves. Any insight into how is it Sai or Say? Any insight on how Rocker's offseason has been? Has there been increased velocity or new pitches? I don't think there needs to be any real work on his velocity. He's got average to plus velocity. I do think that one thing that the Rangers spent a lot of time last season on after he was kind of shut down in the minor leagues and went into this internal pitching development program that was the same kind of program that Jack Leiter went into towards the end of the 23 season. It was designed to help him get more confident with an off-speed pitch. Don't know exactly where that stands at this point in time, and we'll get to see it obviously early in camp. But yeah, that's a huge priority. He has got to have something softer that he can command to go with the fastball and the hard slider. And if he has a third pitch, it makes it much more viable that he can make it at least 2 times through the lineup and maybe a third turn on occasion. But that's the key to Kumar being a part of the opening day rotation. He's got to show the ability to use 3 pitches with confidence. There just wasn't a third pitch last year. Steve wants to know about Josh Smith's offensive fade in the second half. Sorry, I needed to wet my whistle with a Diet Coke. I guess that's the official non-sponsor of the YouTube Live. But yeah, you asked Steve how much might be a result of the extra prep required to be ready to play multiple positions. Listen, we've asked Josh about this. The entire media crew, I think, has all taken turns asking him how much of a mental wear that is on him and a physical wear and tear to do the extra prep that's required. And he said there's no excuse. It's not an excuse. He has said that more than fatigue physically, the biggest issue for him has been that he's gotten into this pattern of, okay, he gets to the end of the first half, he's in a pretty good offensive place, and then and this is not uncommon with young players. They get to a place and then they're trying to maintain their season instead of just going out there and doing what they've done all first half. They're trying to, what do I need to do to keep this up? What do I need to do to maintain? And that leads to some experimentation, some tweaking, as we like to call it, and so forth and so on. And what you do is you create a downward spiral, and it's almost impossible to get out. Then you're chasing results, and you're chasing going 4 for 4 on days, and you just can't do that. So I think there are lots of legitimate questions about Josh Smith and his ability to kind of put together a full effective season. And for me, what I outlined in the 26 for 26 column is I'd like to see a guy who can finish at like a 725 OPS. And based on his first half last year, he just needs to basically OPS 650 in the second half, a 325 OBP, 325 slug, and you've done it. And that gets you to just above league average offensively. And quite frankly, that's about 30 points above what the Rangers got from second base last year. So it would be an upgrade, and it would be a not insignificant upgrade. But I don't think we're going to get those answers until the season plays out with any confidence, because it's just going to be a matter of, you put together the first half, but it's the second half where the questions lie. Steven wants to know, he likes the spirit of the Gore trade. This is a long question. But Gavin Fein was a lot of an overpay, was something of an overpay. Were the Rangers looking at other starting pitchers, and what do you think of the package, of that prospect package to Pittsburgh for Keller, Santana, and some cash? Also, a very nice compliment about the coverage we provide. Thank you, Stephen. I'm terrible at comping trade packages, so I can't really speak to the Mitch Keller situation. I don't know how available Keller was. I do think there were 3 lefties that were available this offseason that were somewhat established. Gore, I think Kyle Freeland could have been had. I think Matthew Liberator was at least at some point in time somebody who was being talked about. I think St. Louis has decided to move forward with him. But if you go where Mackenzie Gore is age wise, and you go with what he did in the first half last year, he certainly seemed primed to be a pitcher that was willing, that was ready to take significant steps from being an established big league pitcher to a top tier big league starter. And the Rangers' evaluation, there are some things that they feel like they can help him with just a little bit. Um, I think in general terms, we're talking a little bit more about first pitch strike percentage and getting ahead. When he gets ahead of hitters, he's a top 15 pitcher in the league. And when he gets ahead of hitters, I should say. Um, but that's been a little bit of a struggle for him. I think he was a 60% first pitch strike pitcher last year. I think the Rangers would like to up that to another point or two in terms of effectiveness and get him ahead in more counts. So I think that this package could be an overpay, but look, I think it works um, for both teams involved. Um, the Rangers are in a position where they want to try and win now. They want to still have this window. You know, you've got Jacob DeGrom at 38. You've got Nathan Eovaldi at 34, I think. You've got Seager in his 30s. You've got these guys on long-term deals. They want to win. Gore was available. The Nationals are a team that has overhauled their front office. They are looking for a first step in that direction. This got them a lot of prospect capital. Gavin Feene is still a long way away from the big leagues. High school hitter, played, I think, 30 games last year at the minor league level after signing. Abimelech Ortiz, I look at him as, in the best case scenario, kind of like a Rowdy Tellez, which is an effective big league player, but certainly not an all star. Then you get down to Alejandro Rosario, who has a lot of upside, but it's going to be 3 years between times that he pitched, and he hasn't pitched above Class A really. So there's still a ways for Alejandro Rosario to prove when he gets back on the mound after he has Tommy John, which should be upcoming here very shortly, but he's still going to have a year after that. Then you get down to guys like Jeremy Cabrera, who is, a project and is a very young player, still very raw, and Devin Fitzgerald, an infielder who I like an awful lot and who I think maybe kind of in the Thomas GC uh, mode, which was a guy that the Rangers struggled to give up in the Jordan Montgomery trade, but they eventually had to do it. And he's made his debut with the Cardinals, and I think he will play regularly with the Cardinals upcoming. Um, but Fitzgerald's a little bit away from that and missed a lot of time last year. And these are the things that you have to do to make these trades to win now. The Rangers had a thin system, so they had to pay with quantity over multiple guys that were proven high quality top 100 prospects. They didn't have the finances to go out and spend on a free agent pitcher, so they had to go this route. These are the risks that you take on in this situation where the Rangers are. Yeah, there's risk involved in the deal, but I think that what I will say to wrap this question up, Stephen, it's a great question, but I think what I will say is I've looked at what the Rangers have done with pitching evaluation over the last few years, particularly since Chris Young came in at the top of the organization, and the moves they have made, whether they're value moves or whether they were big time moves, they have all pretty much paid off in a big way. And so I think their evaluation here, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt on the risk factor and say that this is a guy that could really take a step forward this year. And one last thing on this, Mackenzie Gore pitched in the number one spot last year in Washington, which meant he pitched opening day against Zach Wheeler. He's not going to face those guys regularly this year. As the number three guy in this rotation, he's certainly going to get a little bit lesser of an opponent, and that may factor into something else. And I know you guys are going to look at this with eye rolls, but Gore got some of the worst run support in baseball last year, and if this Rangers offense is a little bit more effective and he's pitching in the number three spot, he should get more run support than he did last year. So that all may play a factor. Um, I'm gonna close questions down here at this point in time just because I want to get to a couple other things, but I will try to address whatever else comes in in some form or fashion. We've got 3 questions left in the queue, and I want to answer those. Um, I really want you to uh, hopefully like this video and comment on it. Um, after it goes up, after the recording goes up. Um, and please subscribe to the channel. I'd really like to do this. I really like doing this more than kind of trying to type out answers to Evan help us. I think it can be more engaging for you guys, and hopefully I think it can be more fun. So um, I'll try and address other questions in the next episode of this, whether it's next week or the week after. And I will take all your suggestions on what you'd like to see here, and whatever we can do within our capabilities, we will try to do that. So with that, let me get to these last couple of questions, and then we'll wrap up for today. Um, we're just going to go with Dub. Dub wants to know why the Rangers. Well, he doesn't want to know why. He said the Rangers need Duran at second base, then Smith can play all over the field. Duran has proven to be solid with consistent playing time. I would dispute some of this, Dub, only in this regard. Look, I think Josh Smith has played a really good defensive second base. He's played really good defensively wherever he's been. And quite frankly, Ezekiel Duran has played good wherever he's been. And look, if you've watched his throws from the outfield the last couple of years, the few throws he's made, he's got incredible accuracy, a strong arm, and good velocity. He very well could be, a factor in the right-handed component of an outfield platoon with say Evan Carter, if that was the matter. I don't think there's any issues with Duran playing short or third base if he needs to. And look, what you may end up having at second base is something of a platoon where Josh Smith plays primarily against the right-handers. Duran plays second base against lefties and gets the rest of his playing time spelling other guys around the field and maybe some time at DH. I do agree with you that in a perfect case scenario, Duran would get more playing time because I do think that this is a guy who excels more with more regular playing time. But it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing, right? You've got to earn the playing time to get the playing time. And so he's got to prove that he can be effective in the field. Um, and that was a real problem last year. There were opportunities for him to play. He just couldn't he couldn't take advantage of the opportunities when they were presented to him. So um, that's what's that's what's going to be determined. And as we mentioned, I think Miguel Andujar is still on the Rangers' radar on the free agent front, because I think they could use another utility guy. You've had 2 utility guys in Smith and Duran last year. Right now, you've got Duran, and either you're looking at Cody Freeman or potentially Michael Hellman. I think the Rangers could use another option there who could be a veteran, productive utility guy. Um, and I will just say, Duran has had a good winter league in the Dominican, so he's in position to come into camp and really get off to a good start, and hopefully he will. The last couple questions here. Cy doubling up. Is Chris Young on the hot seat if they fail to make the playoffs for the 3rd consecutive season? I don't think so. I think that look, he won a World Series, and I think that starts the clock all over. And then he got an extension after that. I think that Ray Davis, with John Daniels as the example, he's been very patient with his GMs, and I don't think Chris should be on the hot seat, quite frankly. I mean, if you want to look at the glass half full situation, yeah, he won a World Series in his first year, and he's had one losing season. The Rangers were 81-81 last year, and we've made a lot of reference to non-winning seasons, but it was also a non-losing season. So I think the Rangers need to take a step forward this year, and I think with each year that a GM misses the postseason, certainly criticism ramps up. But this winter, his hands have been tied a little bit. I think with the resources that the Rangers have had, Chris has done a remarkable job of addressing a number of issues. The one question I still have is about the bullpen, but I don't think the Rangers had the money to go spend $14 million at a minimum, on a closer like a Devin Williams or a Ryan Helsley. They didn't have that kind of money. They haven't spent more than $6 million on any free or $7 million on any free agent this winter, and that was to get the 2-year deal, 2 years, $14 million, 7 per year with Danny Jansen. Um, that's half the AAV of what Devin Williams and Ryan Helsley got. So I just don't think they had the resources to do that without leaving other gaping holes. And look, they needed to get a catcher capable of catching 70, 75 games at the bare minimum. Um, Last one for today. Bill Flanagan, my good friend again. How do you think the clubhouse might change with Skip Schumacher? He seems to have serious energy. Yeah, listen, I think there are going to be some changes under Skip. I think he's going to be more proactive in the clubhouse than Bruce Bochy was. I don't want that to be a criticism of Bruce Bochy. I think Bruce understood what his strengths were. His strengths as a manager were, as an older manager, trusting the clubhouse, trusting leadership to do its job, and giving them their space to establish clubhouse hierarchy. The Rangers haven't really done that in that clubhouse. And so I think now the opportunity is there for Skip to be, as a younger manager who can still relate to a lot of players, and with coaches who, are younger. Jordan Teagues is a younger guy. Travis Jankowski was a teammate of many of these guys in 23 and 24. There's the opportunity to be more, I don't want to say vocal, but I think there will be more active conversations. I think there will be a more proactive approach than there was under Boch. And I will say this too, and I've used this analogy over and over again. Managerial hires always tend to go via pendulums. Boch was an older guy who kind of trusted his instincts a little bit more, trusted veteran players. What you do when you make a change, you go for a younger guy who's going to be a little bit more proactive and may buy in to some data trends and may even be thinking in a more data specific way going forward. But yeah, I think the clubhouse culture needs to improve, Bill, however that is affected. Um, Certainly, there's been some talk about what the Marcus Semien Corey Seager dynamic was like, and I think the fact of the matter was there just wasn't a dynamic. It'd be hard to call it a problematic relationship because I just don't think those guys ever developed a relationship. I think that was not so much due to one or the other disliking the other. I think it was more of a fact that you had one guy who prepared for the game in one way, one guy who prepared for the game in another way, one guy who ended up being kind of the team spokesman and was, I think, forced a little bit into that role in Marcus. Another guy who was not very comfortable in the spotlight in Corey. And so you had these divergent paths. And I think when they both performed really well, um, the team performed. And when they didn't, or when they were missing, like Seager missed significant parts of the last 2 years, and Simeon's performance went downward, the team didn't really perform well either. So I think all of that is a factor. And I do think that hunger, to go back to what we started with today, hunger and clubhouse culture, and putting hunger into that clubhouse culture, which I don't think means that they're not going to have a spread or anything in there for guys to eat. I just think that, it's going to be an underlying message, and you can't force it on players. You can't tell them, I want to see you hungry, I want to see you this, I want to see you that. But there are ways that you can kind of organically try to encourage that. And I think that's something that will be a huge project in spring training. Is a hungry team is a team that has good clubhouse culture, and that is something that you aren't going to get entirely during spring training, but you can start to infuse during spring training. And then once you hit adversity, that's when it really melts. And that's what the Rangers will face with that tough schedule to start the regular season. So I think your questions were all great today. Um, I think the couple things that we didn't hit on were the bullpen. I was surprised that there weren't more questions about the bullpen. I'll just say this: look, I think the Rangers also have had a good track record the last 2 years in remaking the bullpen on the fly. The Kirby Yates signing was a huge uplift for the 24 team after a 23 team didn't convert saves, and Kirby was a great bargain who turned into a really effective closer. Last year, the Rangers wholeheartedly overhauled the bullpen, and they got really good success. I think one thing in that bullpen success that gets overlooked sometimes is we've talked about Sean Armstrong, we talked about Hobie Milner. Both of those guys are gone, and other guys are going to have to step into their place this year. One thing we did not talk about was that Cole Winn really jumped into a strong contributor role as the season progressed. And he needs to take the next step towards being not just a contributor, but more of a leverage guy. And then somebody from the minor leagues, and there's three hard throwers down there that I've got my eye on in Mark Church, Emiliano Teodo, and a little bit further behind, Isaac Tiger, all of whom could eventually move into that role at some point this season and contribute. Maybe in the case of Church or Teodo, maybe at the start of the season. But the next step and place that the Rangers are positioned to get some help from the minor leagues is in that bullpen. So the bullpen is an uncertainty going into the season. It was an uncertainty going into the season last year, but I think the Rangers have some options, and I think that they will continue to try and bring guys through there, and they may still add a guy. The other thing that we didn't mention today was Jock Peterson, and that is a question that's a huge question going into spring training. Jock had an awful year last year. Sub 200 batting average, just wasn't healthy for much of the year after getting hit on the wrist and breaking his wrist. And I don't think that clubhouse dynamic really was what Jock was used to. And so I think he's a guy who could benefit from a refresh in the clubhouse. I think he's a guy who you don't get to be a 10-year big leaguer who's contributed the way Jock Peterson has without hunger and pride and drive. And I think this past year was an embarrassment for Jock. And I think that he has spent this offseason trying to get back into a place where he's in a good place. He's hitting with Justin Vealey, hitting instructor, like 3 days a week all winter since they've both been in Arizona. And so it's going to be really interesting early in spring to see where Jock is when he comes into camp. But that is a big question. I think he will go into the season as the DH, particularly against right-handed pitchers. But I don't think that there's especially since he will be on the last year of his contract, I don't know that there will be a long leash for Jock to continue to struggle. So that's another thing that I will be looking at in spring training. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I was thinking we'd be great if we could get through a half an hour today. We're approaching 45 minutes. Really appreciated the questions. They were great. The comments have been great. And make sure you like the video or pass along to people that this video was up there, and hopefully they'll see it and maybe like it after they watch it on the recording. Subscribe. Hit me up on Twitter at Evan_P_Grant or on Blue Sky at Evan P. Grant, or my email, egrant@dallasnews.com. Let me know how we did. Let me know what we can do to make this better. Let me know if you want to see more of these, and hopefully this will fill another void in your consumption of Rangers news. Until next week or the week after or whenever we get this on air again, thanks. Follow along at the newspaper and online. We've got a great team with me and Sean McFarland on the Rangers. Our columnists, Kevin Sherrington and Tim Kalishaw, will be weighing in as well. We're trying to make more and more inroads to reach you guys via social media, on video, on Instagram, everywhere we can. So we hope you appreciate the effort, hope you appreciate what we're bringing to you, and hope we're giving you a valued product when it comes to Rangers.